PUC English Academy. PUC Second Course Book. Welcome back to my channel. 2 PUC English, Lesson 2 Dear by Leo Tolstoy. 4 marked questions and answers in about 100 words. List of all questions. 1. Write a note on Monaco, a tiny kingdom. 2. Why couldn't the king give the death sentence to the prisoner? 3. Why did they fail to keep the criminal in the prison? 4. Why did the criminal refuse to run away from the prison? 5. Write a note on taxes and the gaming house in Monaco. 6. Write a note on the criminal's character. 7. Write a note on the king's character. Answers. 1. Write a note on Monaco, a tiny kingdom. Monaco is a tiny kingdom situated on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, near the borders of France and Italy. It is so small that it has only about 7,000 inhabitants, and if its land were divided equally, there would not be even an acre for each citizen. Despite its miniature size, it has a real kinglet who lives in a palace, surrounded by courtiers, ministers, a bishop, and a small army of 60 men. The kingdom is too small to levy heavy taxes on basic items, so the king survives and maintains his court largely through a monopoly on a gaming house, roulette. 2. Why couldn't the king give the death sentence to the prisoner? When a murder was committed in Monaco, the court sentenced the criminal to death. However, Monaco faced a major hurdle: they had neither a guillotine nor an executioner. The kinglet tried to rent them from France for 16,000 francs and from Italy for 12,000 francs. Both options were far too expensive, costing more than 2 francs per capita of the population, which would require a heavy tax. The soldiers refused to kill the criminal in rough and homely fashion. The king refused to spend so much money on a scoundrel, concluding that the expense was too dear. Therefore, the death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. 3. Why did they fail to keep the criminal in the prison? They failed to keep the criminal in prison because of the mounting costs and logistical issues. Initially, the government placed the prisoner in a temporary lockup and hired a guard to watch him and fetch his food from the palace kitchen. After a year, the king noticed that the guard and the food were costing the state a hefty 600 francs annually. To save money, they dismissed the guard, hoping the prisoner would run away. However, the prisoner refused to flee, forcing them to find a cheaper alternative, which eventually led to offering him a pension. 4. Why did the criminal refuse to run away from the prison? The criminal refused to run away because the government's actions had ruined his prospects. When the guard was dismissed, the prisoner simply walked out, fetched his own food from the palace kitchen, and returned to his cell. When explicitly told to run away, he complained that he had nowhere to go. He argued that the government had ruined his character by sentencing him to death and that people would turn their backs on him. Furthermore, he had grown lazy in prison and forgot how to work, so he demanded his right to stay or receive a pension. 5. Write a note on taxes and the gaming house in Monaco. The kinglet of Monaco needed revenue to maintain his court, ministers, and army. He levied taxes on tobacco, wine, spirits, and a poll tax. However, because the population was so small, these taxes were insufficient to cover the kingdom's expenses. To make up for the deficit, the king relied heavily on a gaming house where people played roulette. It was the only gambling house left in Europe, as other German sovereigns had banned them. Despite the moral issues, the kinglet kept it open because it brought in large sums of money, proving that dirty money still feeds a court. 6. Write a note on the criminal's character. The criminal in the story appears to be quite clever, practical, and highly opportunistic. After committing a murder, he calmly accepts his confinement. When he realizes that the government is desperate to get rid of him to save money, he smartly uses the situation to his advantage. He refuses to run away, pointing out that they ruined his reputation and ability to work. By staging a peaceful strike, he successfully manipulates the council into granting him a lifelong annual pension of 600 francs. He ends up living a comfortable, law-abiding life just across the border. 7. Write a note on the king's character. The Kinglet of Monaco is portrayed as a vain, highly impractical, and deeply money-minded ruler. He loves the pomp and show of royalty, insisting on having crowns, palaces, courtiers, and an army despite ruling over a tiny population. He lacks true moral principles, as he gladly funds his kingdom through a gambling house that ruins many families. Furthermore, his governance is entirely driven by financial convenience rather than justice. He alters judicial sentences solely based on what is cheaper for his treasury, showing that his primary concern is his budget, not law and order. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share, like, comment.